Wonderful. I want to welcome all of you to Foundation for Defense of Democracies. This is the Robert Shillman Dr. Bob Conference Room, and we're pleased to have you here today. That text message is actually a great reminder that if anybody has their cell phone on, please put it to vibrate or turn it off. As a courtesy, we want to make sure that that we are uninterrupted. This conversation with member of Knesset Yair Lapid is part of an ongoing series of conversations that take place here at FTD. We welcome a wide range of actors and leaders from across the Middle East to engage in discussions here in Washington about international security, about Middle East stability, and so we welcome you. I don't believe that Mr. Lapid requires a good deal of introduction, but I'll do it anyway. He is the chairman and founder of Yesh Atid, which is the second largest party in Israel right now. It is the largest centrist party in Israel. Mr. Lapid is former finance minister, currently serving on the Foreign and Defense Committees. And before entering into politics, Mr. Lapid was a well-known TV personality. He's a best-selling author, including the book Memories After My Death, which is a memoir of his father, Tommy Lapid, who was also a journalist and politician in Israel. So we welcome you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what I thought we would do today is to try to get through a wide range of topics relatively quickly. Maybe for the next 20 or 25 minutes, I'll give you questions in sort of a rapid-fire fashion. And then from there, we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. We're also, by the way, for those watching at home, we're taking questions via Twitter today. We've entered a new age. So let me begin with this. I would say that the biggest debate that we've had in recent years in Washington has been about the Iran deal, the so-called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It was highly controversial. The controversy was recently sparked again after an article written by David Samuels was published, alleging that there was an echo chamber here in Washington. Regardless of the messaging, it has been a controversial deal. There are those who say that it's a good thing, those who say that it's very damaging to Israel. What is your take specifically on this deal? What does it mean for Israel short-term and long-term, and perhaps just a word or two about the overall threat from Iran?
Well, I would say my take of 2016 would be a bit different than the one of 2015, meaning the deal is now behind us. And there was quite a bit of antagonism between the Israeli and the American administration surrounding this deal. I was against the deal. I'm still against the deal. But we cannot let the deal become an obstacle in the relationship between the United States and Israel. And I think that in a friendly manner, Israel should tell America right now, listen, if you have a deal that we disagreed with, the least you can do is A, enforce it, and B, make sure the deal doesn't make Iran kosher on other stuff. Meaning Iran is still the biggest sponsor of terror around the globe. Iran is still hanging gay people from telephone poles, and it's okay to beat your wife if you're unpleased with her. All these things that traditionally the West and America, of course, is standing against are happening in Iran. So the notion that Iran is okay now is problematic to me, and this is what we are discussing with the American administration. On top of this, I will say only that the deal has made us face new challenges, security challenges that we didn't face before, and this is probably part of the discussion we have now on the new MOU with the American administration.
So great, let's talk about the MOU. There's been a lot of talk about Israel's qualitative military edge. We have a project here at FTD that looks at this, and one of the things that we've identified is that Israel's QME is eroding, that you have the so-called moderate Arab states that are bringing in advanced weaponry, a lot of it purchased from the United States. as a result of the nuclear deal, that they're fearful of a more powerful Iran. And so as a result, Israel's adversaries, perhaps not direct enemies right now, are getting stronger. And at the same time, the MOU is being worked out with the White House, where Israel got, as we understand it, not quite everything that it wanted. Can you just give us a sense of how you look at Israel's qualitative military edge and how you feel about this MOU?
Well, there's a basic ground rule in the Middle East. Advanced weapons that goes into the Middle East will fall in the wrong hands sooner or later, usually sooner. And I understand when people are saying, yes, but the Saudis are fighting the good fight in Yemen, and therefore we have to help them. But cautiousness and experience shows that the kind of weaponry that is being used there is going to be used somewhere else. And you know what? If you look at the deals that are being made now with Iran of the S-300 and S-400 and other weapons, advanced weapons that went into the Middle East, and then we have to follow them going from Iran to Syria and then from Syria in convoys to the hands of Hezbollah, one of the worst terror organizations on earth. And Hezbollah today is more dangerous than ever because now they have 3 or 4 years of combat experience they didn't have before. So, and you don't want to see Yahunt missiles, I don't know, 35 miles from your gas fields, for example. So I would urge everybody to be very cautious about any kinds of armament in the Middle East.
And as far as the MOU is concerned?
Well, the MOU should or must give us answers to the new questions we are facing. You know what? One should say, we are grateful. Israel is grateful. Israel is grateful for the support and the protection and the kind of friendship the United States has been offering now for 68 years. And we're not taking this lightly. And the fact that we are negotiating on the details of the MOU, you know, people are saying a lot of numbers are in there where it's going to be, you know, 3.8 or 4, and maybe there will be, you know, like a signing bonus, yes or no. Still, it's a conversation, it's a discussion, not an argument. And it seems to me that right now the kind of bad blood that was surrounding the discussions about the Iranian deal with the president and the prime minister is not surrounding this discussion, and hopefully a deal can be sealed within the next month. I strongly suggest my government, and I've said this publicly and I've said this in private conversation with the Minister of Defense and other people, that Israel will sign the deal with this administration and will not wait for the next administration.
You mentioned Hezbollah. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of days about Hezbollah. They've lost some leaders in the field, most recently their most senior commander. And we continue to hear about the rocket threat that they have amassed, that 6 months ago it was deemed to be 100,000 rockets. Now we're hearing from Israeli military that it could be 150,000. You mentioned Yahant missiles. You mentioned the S-300s, other threats that they may pose. What is your sense? I mean, you serve on committees that deal with this issue. What is your sense of the timeline for the next conflict? We hear a lot right now about a looming conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Is this something that Israeli war planners are worrying about now, and what sorts of plans are being made?
Well, there's a saying in the Bible, Ashrei Yesh Atid Yair Lapid. The man who's always careful will be better off. I would say the following. After the Second Lebanon War in 2006, it was obvious both Israel and Hezbollah will not be anxious to have another round. I think this past 3-4 years in Syria has delayed the possibility. Israel has no interest whatsoever in another round of violence with Hezbollah, and I don't think Hezbollah has an interest in another round of violence with Israel. So it's tense. We have to be on our toes always, but it is I would say it's an educated guess to say that I see no future around violence in the near future.
Okay. There was an interesting debate that took place after the 2014 war between Israel and Hamas. There were some in the Israeli government that said that it was the right move for Israel not to put significant troops on the ground and to have a longer conflict than already took place. 50 days was quite enough. There were others, I believe, including yourself, who criticized the Netanyahu government for not destroying Hamas entirely. What is the state of play right now with regard to Hamas? I mean, we continue to see the tunnel threats. We hear more and more about more rockets coming in. Is that still a debate? Is there still discussion of wiping out Hamas entirely? And I think more importantly, what is the sense of what would come after Hamas if in fact the next round led to Hamas's destruction?
Well, just to put the facts straight, I was part of the cabinet in 2014 and part of the government still, and therefore I was part of this protective edge operation, and therefore I cannot comment on the way it was handled. But I can say, and I've said this in real time, that after the protective edge operation, we have missed a huge opportunity of going into a big move of demilitarize Gaza in return for its rehabilitation. And for political reasons, I will not criticize my government on foreign soil, but so I will just say for political reasons, we didn't go to this move. And eventually, the donors conference gathered in Cairo in the end of 2014 and decided to give $5.4 billion for the rehabilitation in Gaza. And nobody even mentioned the possibility of taking out weapons or blocking the terror tunnels or do something about the Qassam missiles. And I think we have missed a huge opportunity there. I said it publicly then, I'm saying it now. This was not the right way to handle things. The threat is still there. I think Hamas, again, is not interested in another round right now. But there will be another round because Hamas is a terrible terror organization that wants to kill Jews just because they're Jews. It's in 12 times in the Hamas manifesto, there is the call for the total destruction of the land of the Jews. So they don't even hide what is it that they want to do.
Very briefly, if you're able to talk about the technology that's being developed to counter the tunnels. We've heard little bits and pieces about some success. Can you give us any color on that?
Sorry.
Okay, I had to try.
Yes, it's
okay. Let's talk about the Middle East peace process or lack thereof.
Yeah. Which Middle East?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, I think most of us in this room agree that there's a good deal of frustration on the part of this administration for not being able to move forward with the Middle East peace plan. We now, of course, are hearing about a French initiative that Secretary of State John Kerry now appears to be eager to join. What is your assessment of how that may play out? And you yourself have some ideas about how to jumpstart the peace process. If you could just perhaps weigh in on that as well.
Well, first of all, nobody really understands what the French are after right now. I mean, probably they have good intentions, but the thing is, first they gave a date, then it turned out half of the people cannot come, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but we don't know enough. And I had meetings yesterday with the administration. I'm not sure they know enough, and I'm not sure. Secretary of State Kerry said he wants to be involved. I think he said he might come. There's a difference there. On top of this, I would say last September, I presented the Israeli public with a plan for a regional summit that I think is the right path towards a peace process and the two-state solution. And what I said there is that since the Oslo Accords, there were 11 rounds of bilateral talks, all came out to the same nothing, and we should take another path. And what I think is the right way to do it is to go to a regional summit that will start a regional process, even due to the fact that it's a regional problem. I mean, you cannot discuss, for example, Gaza unless the Egyptians are involved. You cannot discuss the Jordan Valley unless the Jordanians are involved. and you cannot discuss the creation of a Palestinian state unless you bring on the Saudis and the Gulf countries and all those people who are supposed to finance and help. So it's a regional thing anyway. And you know what? And the benefits and the incentives for the Israeli public are also regional, because this is opening markets the size of Europe for us, with what you called the more moderate Sunni states. I would call them the more conservative Sunni states. So I think a regional move is the right move, but not one who's being imposed on Israel. The Palestinians can do whatever they want. I don't want anything that is imposed on my country. We are free people. I mean, part of the reason we have this very deep-rooted friendship with the United States is because we share values, and the values we share is the fact that we are free people in free countries who can determine the future in their own hands.
So speaking of shared values, or perhaps lack thereof, I'm very interested in hearing your take on the recent outreach between Israeli officials and Saudi officials. A lot has been made of the potential warming ties. I have to be counted among the skeptics that there's some sort of a warm and blossoming relationship between the Saudis and the Israelis, or perhaps even most of the rest of the Gulf Arab states. How would you describe the evolving discussions right now? I mean, I understand a lot of this is just about shared perception of threat from Iran. Is that the extent of it, or is there more?
Well, there is a new rule in the Middle East. The old rule was, you are either my enemy or my friend. And this has changed completely. Due to since the Arab Spring, the map of interests in the Middle East has changed so much that now you can be my enemy on one issue and my friend on another. It just became way more complicated. And the Saudis are players. And the Saudis are, if you are trying to build an axe, anti-Iran axe, you cannot ignore the Saudis. And I'll give you a personal example. After I published my plan for a regional summit, I met in New York with Prince Turki Faisal, who was the ambassador here in Washington. And so we've met in one of those hotels that Saudi princes are going to. And we discussed it, and we had he's a very nice man. We had a very nice discussion. And in the end, I said to him, you know, you don't have to be worried. This is strictly off the record. I will never tell anyone. And he said, no, we want you to publish the fact that we've met. So he's semi-official. This is a semi-official conversation. And yet the Saudis are saying it is not what it used to be. Now, the Saudis today are very interesting. Bin Salman is doing interesting things. Bin Naif is an interesting person. It's a country on the move, and we have to locate the interest that allows us to talk, and ignore the problems, or and disagree on things that I don't think it's the right thing for any country to hang 47 people. And we're going to be loud about this the same way the United States is. And yet, the map of interest is just more complicated than that.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we'll open up the floor. If you could maybe just speak briefly about the Israeli relationship with Russia. It's complicated. You know, we see the Russians obviously working very closely with the Iranians, and obviously Israel has an interest in weakening that. Yet there are channels that remain open. Even some of the operations that have allegedly taken place where Israel has struck targets inside Syria, you know, it raises the question of whether there's deconfliction before Israeli warplanes enter Syrian airspace. A lot of questions out there. If you could maybe just spend a few minutes explaining this complicated relationship.
Well, it's a perfect example to what I just said about the fact that the maps of interests are not as clear as they used to be. Russia is a friend. We have very good relations with Russia. We are unhappy with the fact that Russia, for example, signed the $21 billion deal with Iran 3 minutes after the agreement was signed. We are unhappy with the fact, I mean, we have managed to discuss with them and delay a bit the first S-300 deal. It seems to be harder now. So there are disagreements. But basically, the relations are good. And Syria, you're right about the fact that in Syria, you have to have an ongoing ability to convert for a conversation just due to practical reasons on daily basis, and we have that. We have an ability to talk to the Russians about what is going on in the air of, mostly in the air of Russia and of Syria and Israel.
For my last two questions, I want to just focus on...
No, you said two questions before.
Sorry.
So now it's
a
either one or you're
question.
taking a word back.
Wow, this is tough. You're here right now as there are some pretty significant negotiations going on inside Israel about the future of a coalition. Your presence here, I think, speaks volumes. Clearly, your party is not actively taking part in this. How do you see the next coalition taking shape? And how will that change things significantly for Israel, domestically, internationally?
I find it interesting these days when Americans are talking to me about the fact that Israeli politics is crazy.
Well, we have no right to talk. We really have no right to talk.
Well, listen, you know what? It's a joke, but it's not so much of a joke because, politics today is crazy all over the world, and I think people are alarmed by the fact that politicians and politics became so preoccupied with themselves and their interests and what is it they want to achieve for themselves and for their friends and for the people in the party instead of, the country and the citizens and the goodwill of the people. So what you see right now in Israel is a shameful theater of politicians who are taking care of themselves instead of what they should have been taking care of, which is the country. And this is why we are not participating in this. It's no secret I was offered more than once to be part of this coalition. I said no. I said I promised to the people who voted for us that this is not the way we're going to go about it. And I take my word seriously, and therefore we are not part of it. And I wish the Israeli politics will be more focused on the people of Israel.
Last question, I promise.
Okay.
The relationship between the United States and Israel, it's no secret, has been strained. A lot of it obviously has to do with U.S. foreign policy and how much that's changed during the Obama administration. What's interesting to me is, as we've talked today, I haven't heard a whole lot that you've said that strikes me as really a radical shift from what we see from the Netanyahu government. We've heard a lot about how if you were to perhaps one day become prime minister, that you would be able to change the relationship, that you'd be able to transform it in some way. How would you set about doing that if your foreign policies aren't that distinct from this prime minister?
Well, I don't know about distinct. Foreign policy, well, first of all, people are people, and there's always a personal part to every relations. And I sat yesterday with a group of Democratic congressmen in Congress discussing the need to rehabilitate the relations between the Democratic Party and Israel, meaning the part of the force of the relation was the fact it was always bipartisan, and it should stay bipartisan. And even if people disagree, we have to disagree like friends. And later on, I've had actually the same discussion. I met with Senator Graham and Senator McCain, and we discussed this as well. That Israel should, and you know what? Israel should express its gratitude more often. It's important. It's important. Having the one superpower in the world as your friend and ally, closest friend, closest ally, is a blessing. And we need to be happy and respectful in the same time, while saying our pieces. I mean, nobody's going to control us from afar. So this is one part of it. The other part of it is. I'm being very, very cautious because, again, I don't want to criticize my prime minister abroad. But if somebody speaks Hebrew, you can find things I've said before. But the thing is, in times like this one, like the time we're having now, which is all interests are re-examined. You have to be more flexible about the things you say, about looking again at your policies, about listening to the people who tell you, you know, we are well informed as well, and therefore it's a good idea, we'll discuss things. I mean, I went into politics because I want my country, I want the Israel generation 1.5. I want my country to go to the next level. I think we have a lot of place, all aspects, in all aspects to progress as a country. And one of the keys in a global world is the ability to communicate with the American administration.
Okay, I'm going to start taking questions from the audience. When I recognize you, please just stand up, wait for the microphone, state your name and affiliation, and try to keep your question short. Rafi.
Thank you. I'm Rafi Danziger, an advisor to AIPAC. And my question has to do with the major speech that Sisi gave yesterday. We talked both about perhaps mediating between Israel and Palestinians and about mediating between Hamas and Fatah. And I think the remarkable thing was that within minutes, basically, both Netanyahu and Herzog welcomed the speech, and then Abbas did too. Even Hamas did not object. So what's your take about all this? Seems an interesting development.
Well, I will just say the following. When there is a speech that Hamas, Abbas, President Abbas, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and MK Herzog are welcoming, then it's not that dramatic. It was a positive speech. It was the setting was interesting. He didn't do it in Cairo, very remote, very nice, you know, opening a factory sort of occasion. He said, it's a very positive thing that the Egyptian president will say, you know, we are all for the return to the negotiation table. I think we will be supportive. We'll do our best to be helpful. These are all great things that have been said before, and but we need the players themselves to be there. And but you know, I think very highly on the importance of Egyptian involvement in any future process. And you know, I'm talking to the Egyptians, and when I presented my initiative for a regional summit, I've talked to the Egyptians. I think they're part of it. So all in all, it was a good speech. The timing is interesting, at least, and if this will be followed by other positive steps, then we can ask me again.
Other questions? Yes, Icon.
Giving you the microphone.
Thank you. Aykan Erdemir, Senior Fellow at FTD, former Turkish and failed politician. In October,
recovering politician.
recovering politician, better. In October 2012, you said that rupture with Turkey is damaging to Israel. Today, Israel is at a different place. Turkey is at a different place. What can be done with the Turkey of today and Erdogan of today?
Well, it's a big question. I think among the things that have changed since 2012 is Erdogan himself, in terms of his attitudes and towards Israel and the kind of affiliation that was made with the Islamic Brotherhood. I think listen, Turkey is one of the major players in the region, and we have a good history. If there was a moment in which everybody thought they were going to sign some sort of reconciliation deal, and it wasn't signed. And I think it's in everybody's best interest if it will be signed. Few of the Turkish demands were a bit out of the box, but this is why people negotiate. So if you ask me, generally, I think it is important for Israel and Turkey to be able to communicate. There are 4 countries in the Middle East that do not have real existential threat to the idea of a nation state, which is Turkey, Iran, Egypt, and Israel. this is not by accident. These are the 4 countries that have real historical roots that were not part of the Sykes-Picot map, and of course, I don't think in any near future we're going to have relations with Iran. But if we can have with Turkey and a better relationship, it will be a positive thing.
If I can actually follow up on that, one of the things that we've identified here at FTD, we've done a lot of work on Turkey, is that there are roughly a dozen Hamas operatives that are currently located in Turkey. The most senior among them, at least up until recently, was Salah Harouri, who was, of course, the mastermind and financier of the kidnapping and killing of the 3 teens that led to the Hamas war in 2014 that lasted for 50 days. Is the presence of Hamas in Turkey seen as one of those major stumbling blocks to reconciliation, or is that seen as a channel for Israel to maintain some sort of a quiet dialogue, or maybe a combination of both?
I'm not sure. Israel, if Israel wants, I'm not saying it is, but if it wants to have a back channel with Hamas, Israel knows how. And you're right about the presence of Hamas in Turkey, and you can add to the HHH, which is at least affiliated. And it's not a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing for Turkey either, because it's
a NATO country.
No, but it's trying to ride the tiger, and this never ends well. And it will become a Turkish problem. But I don't think right now, after the protective age operation, when there were discussions about what is the way to go about the ceasefire, there was Secretary Kerry actually was discussing at least the possibility of a Turkish-Qatarish channel, and Israel thought that Egypt will be a better moderator for the ceasefire.
Other questions? Yes.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Jessica Schulberg. I'm with the Huffington Post. Back to the conversation about the coalition negotiations within your government. There's been some talk that if Herzog were to join Netanyahu's government, then Ayman Odeh would be the new opposition leader, which would obviously be sort of unprecedented to have an Arab opposition leader. I'm curious both your thoughts on this and how people within the government are reacting to this possibility.
I don't have an opinion about it yet because I'm hearing it for the first time. I think you're right, though. I think that basically, if Labour is joining the government, then Ayman Odeh is supposedly the head of the opposition. But I'm not sure. It's just I have to look into it. So can I come back to you? Will.
Other questions? Yeah, Neri. Yeah, please.
Hi, Neri Zilber, journalist and also adjunct fellow of the Washington Institute. Mr. Lapid, you haven't made any mystery of the fact that you see yourself in the future as a prime minister, either an alternative to Netanyahu or beyond that. But in order to form a coalition, in theory, you would need the ultra-Orthodox parties. Do you see yourself in the future possibly joining with the ultra-Orthodox in a coalition government?
To begin with, in order for me to become prime minister, I don't need to see myself as prime minister, I need other people. This is way premature. I mean, I understand. I mean, it's the political game, and it's my favorite sport as well, but sport activity. But I am not banning anyone. I'm working in the Knesset today with the ultra-Orthodox parties. We're doing, and things and values we share. We can work together. There was a lot of bad blood. I don't think it is there anymore, or most of it is not there anymore. I have people there who are friends. I have people there who are not friends. I can tell you this from my experience in politics. When push comes to shove, interests are the things that makes the coalitions. So if it will be in everybody's good interest, there will be a coalition, and if not, not. So I wouldn't be worried about this. I'm focusing on winning an election. This is what I need to do.
I'll follow up on that as well. There's been a lot of talk about the changing demographics in Israel, that you have a more religious population, you have a more right-leaning population. How do you see your vision? I know Yesh Atid was founded really on economic and domestic principles. That certainly, I think, I could see some challenges looming as a result of perhaps demographic trends. So how do you see the future of Yesh Atid, so to speak?
Well, interestingly enough, if you look at the demographics since the foundation of Israel, it didn't change that much. I mean, when Israel was established, the ultra-Orthodox were a little less than 10%. You look at the demographics today, the ultra-Orthodox are a little less than 10%. Now, there is a need for Israel as a country to make sure every child in the country, whether it's secular, traditional, Orthodox, Arabic, will get the best education which will enable him to support himself and his children in the future. This has nothing to do with religion. This is nothing. And anyone who's ultra-Orthodox, but he went to the army, was drafted to the army, and then he works and supports himself, and then goes at night to yeshiva and learn Torah, is a brother of mine. And we don't want to exclude people just because of their way of living, not in the States and not in Israel. So I see no problem there with the question if there are 10, 12, 15, or 20% of ultra-Orthodox in Israel or not. The only thing is what kind of a common contract we have among ourselves.
Okay. Other questions? David Daoud.
Kabbalah, Washington. So going into the 19th Knesset, following off that question, one of your big planks was to equalize burden between the religious and the secular in terms of army service, general responsibility, entering the workforce. And you did a lot in the last Knesset, you and the government. Now that the 20th Knesset has gone in, the ultra-Orthodox parties are back in, that seems to have been reversed. Why do you feel that serving in the opposition serves the interests of equalizing the burden between all Israel's citizens more? And going forward, how do you intend to push forward that equality of burden that you emphasized so much in your first campaign?
Well, first of all, the best way is to win an election. Aside from that, we appeal to the Supreme Court in order for the equality of burden not to be reversed. We think our chances are very well. I will accept, of course, whatever the Supreme Court will decide. And this is actually politics at its best, when you have goals and principles and values, and you go into the political arena and you fight for them, whether it's from the opposition or the coalition. It's the business of ideas, and what is it that is good for your people and your country. So, and it's a long journey, and I when I came into politics, I said to a friend of mine, I said, it's my second career, and there will not be a third one. This is what I do, and this is what I'm going to do as long as I can breathe. And part of it is making sure Israel is equal to all its citizens, which seems to me natural and a basic ground rule for every country.
Harold.
Thank you. It's okay. What are your thoughts on, what are your thoughts on the future of domestic policy in Israel? There's an OECD report on the growing gap between the very rich and the very poor in Israel. And the domestic economy is the source of strength for Israel going forward with its own military, commercial industries, etc. So what changes do you think need to occur over the next few years with respect to taxes and housing and trying to deal with this growing gap in Israel?
Well, I would say that first of all, you're right that it's not only problematic, it's becoming more and more problematic. They just released new, very alarming numbers about the big drop in export and growth. And in order to produce the money needed to tighten to improve the economy, to make sure that the social gaps are narrowing down, you need a vibrant economy. And the Israeli economy should be, since we are an island country, sort of, we need to be export based, because then you can grow indefinitely. So it's producing the means and then using the means the right way. And I've mentioned before that I'm worried about the fact that Israel is, if you can say that, politicizing itself to death, meaning the resources are being spread not by the real needs of the country, which is equality, work for the social, work for the poor, making sure every child has a chance. Instead, they're using the money for political reasons due to party lines. And this is bad for the country, and this is bad for the future of the country. We need to invest more in education, for example. It's always amazing to me, for example, that the country that has produced more Nobel Prize winners than China or India do not have at least one university among the top 20 universities in the world. And so we have to push forward for every child to be able to get higher education, which is the big key for social equality. And so on and so forth. So I would say the problem in Israel right now is the politics of Israel. The fact that political system has become something that interferes with our way of life, if to use an American expression, is the major problem of the Israeli system and doesn't allow us to take the country to the next level. So I'm really worried about this, and we have to fix our political system.
Sir.
Thank you very much. Nadav Greenberg, the Brookings Institution. Over the past few weeks, we've seen several highly unusual speeches from senior security figures in Israel, Deputy Chief of Staff, Defense Minister Ya'alon, for now. And I'm curious if, and these speeches had to do with sort of a moral crisis in Israeli society. And I'm curious if you share these senior leaders' concerns, and if so, what you think the proper response of Israeli political leadership, the Israeli political system, your party, should be to those concerns.
Well, I think Israel is facing a phenomena that is worldwide, but since it's Israel, it's on steroids. Which is the fact that right now, if you look at our national discourse, it's not anymore between left and right. It's between sanity and people who say crazy stuff, from the left and the right. People who believe in democracy, people who believe in freedom of speech, people who believe in the fact that compromise is part of life, the people who believe that we need to be tolerant to people who think differently, and people who are saying you have to kill anyone who thinks different, and people who are saying racist stuff, like several Knesset members. And it's a cry that come from the ground. And the fact that army officers were part of this is because they meet young people all the time, and they see this bad vibes as they are filling the air, and they're saying those kids that you're bringing us. I have a son in the army, so they're saying you're bringing us your children, and we are in charge of them. There's an educational part of it, and then. You are not there when people are saying you have to kill Arabs just because they're Arabs, or you have to kill religious people just because they're religious people, or it's okay to I don't know, say terrible stuff. So I think we should take very seriously this cry that is coming from army officers and others. We have in this definite role. I mean, this as Jonathan was saying, I represent the biggest centrist party in Israel. Centrism meaning sanity, meaning having this very clear, sane voice that says we should respect the contract that makes it possible for us to live together in this land of ours.
You know, let me follow up on this notion for a moment. With some of the statements that have been made, there's been some comments that what they're only doing is sort of feeding the so-called boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, that it's feeding this narrative of BDS, this delegitimization, either politically or financially or otherwise, of Israel. A, how do you respond to that? But also, I mean, I know you've weighed in on the BDS movement. If you could just share your thoughts.
Well, to start with, living in a free society comes with a price. And therefore, not to say things you believe in, as long as they are, you know, within the range of reason, because you say it might hurt me somewhere else, it's not a democratic way of thinking. In dictatorships, you can say, you know, you cannot say something bad about the country because they might use, the enemy might use it. And if you don't have an enemy, let's invent an enemy. So I think, yes, there is a price to democracy, and we need to acknowledge this. The BDS movement is a real problem. I read the article, the famous article in the Wall Street Journal that was based on your research, that looked at the BDS movement all the way down to its sources, which is Musab Abu Mazouk and other figures in Hamas, proving, maybe if my memory serves me for the first time, that actually the BDS movement is the doing of a terror organization that calls for the total destruction of Israel, and therefore has nothing to do with settlements or peace initiatives or anything. These are just people who are saying it's another tool. We have terror tunnels, we have Qassam rockets, we have the BDS movements, everything for, we don't want a two-state solution, we want to stay in a Palestinian state instead of Israel, or better off on the ashes of Israel. The BDS movement is, for too long Israel was saying, you know what, nobody knows what it is, let's not let us not make too much noise about this. I think this time has passed. They are too influential by now. The damage is there. Half of the damage, or even more, you can't even see. It's the guy who owns, I don't know, 6 supermarkets in Denmark, and says, why should I buy from the Israelis and somebody might come and demonstrate? I will buy from the Greek or from the Turkish or from whoever. And then it's a silent BDS. It's just the threat that there is there. And we should handle it the way you have said we should handle it, meaning calling the bluff, saying this is not a civil rights movement. These are not people who are talking about the right of the Palestinians. I can say that. I'm for the two-state solution. But this is not what they are about. They're about delegitimize Israel until there will be no Israel, and this we cannot allow, and this will never happen.
Okay, we have, I think, time for maybe a few more questions. John Hanna.
You don't need to do workout today.
Hi, thank you for your talk. John Hanna, Senior Counselor here at FDD. Given the stalemate in the peace process, I know you favor the idea of trying to get a regional summit, but there's a lot of talk now, the resurrection of the idea of maybe some kind of separation, that Israel would unilaterally, maybe some form of coordination with the Palestinians, but not through formal negotiations, begin to set itself off from the West Bank. Can you talk about your view of that and whether you think it has any future?
Well, I'm against anything that is unilateral. We have a very bad experience. 2006, with the disengagement, we left Gaza. We did everything the world has ever asked us to do. Even left 3,000 greenhouses on the ground for the Palestinians of Gaza to have an ability to start building an economy. And instead of building hospitals and schools and a life for themselves, they started building terror tunnels and training camps for the Islamic Jihad. So we have the result of unilateral moves opposite us. And on top of this, I would say the following. Every future agreement, I think separation is the right word, because peace has to do, it's an emotional state. It has to do with good neighborhood. It has to do with lowering the tensions and suspicions and the bad memories we have with the Palestinians. So everything will be an agreement of separation. But any agreement of separation has to include in it the Israeli Defense Forces' ability to operate on the other side of the fence. If there's a terrorist in Ramallah or in Shechem, the Israeli Defense Forces must be able to go there and get him, either to kill him or to get him to justice, as we do today. Because we have learned this lesson, and you cannot have a separation from the Palestinians that becomes a bigger threat on the Israelis. You need to have a separation from the Palestinians, which is lowering dramatically the threat to Israel's security.
We've got time for maybe one more. Okay, Rafi gets another bite at the apple.
Thank you. What's your opinion about the controversy over the natural gas deal? There are those in the government itself that say that the deal with Noble and Delek is the best deal Israel can get, and therefore the Supreme Court decision is a setback, and others say it can get a better deal. What do you stand on that?
Well, we voted against the deal. I don't think it was handled right. I'm not against the idea of a deal. And I'm not a socialist. The socialistic part of Israeli Knesset were against it due to ideological reasons that we didn't hear for, 40 years now. I just thought you should have a mechanism within the deal that allows the government, the future governments actually, not even this government, future governments to be able to make sure, since you're creating a monopoly, there's always a risk in creating a monopoly, so we thought we need a system which allows the government to say, okay, we're not going to let you misuse the fact that you're a monopoly. We have an ability to supervise the prices in order for you not to go over the top. And actually, we were discussing this with the government, and you have to ask them why is it that even though they acknowledge the logic behind it, they decided to try to go about it the way they did, and were not even successful in this. I think it is important for Israel to go to the Leviathan field. It is important for the Israeli economy to be able to hook as many factories as possible to the gas, because it lowers the expenses of the Israeli industry, and this is big money for the people of Israel. This is cheaper electricity, cheaper products. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. You just have to have the right deal, and I think it's doable. I think they got tangled in a political in a political game instead of doing what was right for the country.
Okay, well, we've just grilled you for the last hour. Have we missed anything? Is there anything that you had hoped to talk about that we didn't ask you today?
No, I'm good. I'm happy to be here, and it's happy to be among friends. So I'm happy I came.
Well, thank you. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Round of applause for Yair Lapid.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.